Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues and listeners, here we are again, another weekend show, flying around quicker than usual. And Stephen, I think I know you're still in Malaysia, so thanks again for joining us a little bit later on in the day for you. How's it going over there? What's happening?
Politics, pandemic, paranoia. I think the three Ps we've got over the course of this last week. Let's start with politics. We have had some rumblings now that the government will fall. Last week, to prevent the government falling, the Speaker, who is unusually appointed by the Prime Minister here, the Speaker chose to dissolve Parliament the day before the no confidence vote in the government was about to be held. That was rather convenient timing, I suspect. Unusually, the King spoke out and said, "This is not cricket, lads. This is not how this is supposed to work." And he hauled them over the coals publicly, which is something we've never seen. Totally, we've heard that word unprecedented a lot recently, but this was completely unprecedented for the King to intervene publicly. And write a public open letter about the state of politics in Malaysia. So things are not well here, Chris. This week, the Prime Minister is trying to shore up some confidence amongst his cabinet and ministers, but it doesn't look like he's got the numbers. So I think the government will fall, and the King has asked that the Parliament reconvene to take that vote of confidence in the government. So that means, of course, that people are clutching at straws and trying to throw all sorts of offers and incentives in to MPs and to other parties to try to keep this whole thing together, with the honourable excuse of being let's pull the country together during a difficult time during this pandemic. Because moving us on to the pandemic, Chris, cases, we've been on lockdown here now for over 2 months, and cases keep rising and rising and rising. There is no end in sight. And lockdown continues to be extended now until the end of August. We suspect it will be rolled against after that. So it is still problematic with a slow vaccine rollout, although we are now at 30% of adults in Kuala Lumpur, which is where I live, the capital city, who are vaccinated, but the rest of the country is woefully behind. Although I must say, the United Kingdom and Japan and the United Arab Emirates, thanks very much to the people of the UK, the UAE and Japan for donating 2 million vaccines to Malaysia this week. That was very kind of the taxpayers of those countries. So I think still moving on. And the paranoia, the third P, Chris, is people are still very afraid here. Because there's lots of horror stories and scare stories not only about the effects of COVID, but scare stories about vaccines. Whilst hospitals are actually doing okay, and less than 1% of cases are serious enough to be hospitalized, which is, well, let's say that's a good thing. But the healthcare system, Chris, here in the third world, unfortunately, is not designed, or I should say the developing world, to be more polite, but let's say I sort of a little old school, so that's no slur, by the way, that's just a term that we once used. But in the developing world, particularly here in Malaysia, the healthcare system is creaking at the seams. And imagine that's only 1% of cases, which is around about 300 hospital admissions per day. It's just put the public healthcare into complete and utter disarray. So thanks for asking, Chris. We're not doing all that well, to sum up. To sum up there.
No, but clearly, and like we said, we just as we were coming on, we were talking there about Malaysian Airways offering that $21, opportunity for people who've had the vaccines as an incentive to be vaccinated, which is not a bad thing, huh?
Well, I'm glad you know about it, because we haven't seen that published locally here. So I'd be very happy to look at that or avail of it. But I certainly haven't seen it locally, Chris. But trying, any levers or incentives that can be put out there to try to get people bloody vaccinated are welcome. But if people choose still not to be vaccinated, as I've always said, that is their choice. I will do everything possible to convince them otherwise. But if they choose not to be vaccinated, who am I to question their judgment?
Yeah, no, exactly. But it is, I mean, it is such a shame, Steve, because clearly everywhere else the vaccines are making a huge difference.
Well, I think I was speaking to a colleague here yesterday to do some work with, and it's largely felt, Chris, that the numbers that are being published are rubbish anyway. Malaysia is not known for transparency when it comes to government. We have a judiciary that's appointed by the cabinet and by the prime minister. The attorney general is appointed by the prime minister, the most senior law officer, who unlike in other jurisdictions, acts not just on behalf of the government, but also on behalf of the prosecution. So you can imagine that it's a bit of a banana republic when it comes to that. So transparency is something that Malaysia is not particularly well known for. In fact, in the legal transparency world, I think there's a league table published. We are woefully down the list, around 150 or 60 out of 200 countries in the world. So I'm expecting the cases to be actually greater than are being reported. And it is sad, particularly as our neighbours are starting to move forward. I saw in the press yesterday a Qatar Airways flight arrival into Phuket from Doha, and Phuket is the last holiday that my wife and I were on internationally in March last year for our anniversary, before this whole bloody thing started. So we like Thailand a lot, and they had the fully vaccinated tourists arriving into Phuket for the first time. So that's great news to see. So look, let's say there's a glimmer of hope or light at the end of a very long dark tunnel.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and also, Steve, you know, all the talk now around the US being able to come in, but the other way round, you still got to do the 2 weeks, and people now going via all over the place, you know, different countries, just to spend a couple of weeks, then to get into the States. I think, you know, the whole point of the double vaccinations now, it should be reciprocal, and people should start to honour it. Well, otherwise it devalues the benefit of the vaccinations in the first place.
Yeah, and I'm not one for tit for tat politics or decision making, Chris. But the EU did stand up against the US this week and said, if you don't relent soon, we will stop entry to your citizens. And I think you know, whilst the Americans are happily, you know, jumping on I hope not jumping, because it's terrible consequences if you jump in a gondola. Let me assure you from previous experience, jumping up and down in gondolas is not the done thing. Placing themselves gently into a gondola on the canals of Venice or on the beaches of Spain or the Ile de Ré in the west of France. Meantime, we can't even get in to do, you know, conduct business, or people can't get across the pond to see families that they haven't seen for many years. Many months. Sorry, feels maybe years is the word, but for many months. So I do think that is a bit of an odd one, and I'm not quite sure why the UK and Europe moved in concert, which is interesting. You know, life moves on, life continues post Brexit, and we can still do things through discussion and in concert, which is lovely with our European friends and neighbours and partners. And so we moved in concert. Yeah, the Americans didn't budge. I mean, I find that, wouldn't you wait until both sides were ready?
Yeah, no, of course you would. Of course you would. I've just got a picture in my mind now of you jumping up and down on a gondola. And I'm trying to think what could be the only reason for doing it. Obviously, it must have been when Ramani proposed to you. So that's my picture.
I think it had something to do with one Moretti too many, Chris.
Yeah. But she still proposed. Never mind. Right, now moving on, lovely boy.
That's moving not a true story, by the way. Well, the gondola is, but the proposal of Ramani is not.
I know. Now the other thing as well is, and which is I think well overdue as well, is like, you know, this bloody expensive PCR testing. And you know, now if you've had double vaccinations, why and you know, it should be replaced with a more affordable, you know, the lateral flow testing. So, you know, people are starting to realise now, if people have got a little bit more money, they'll start to travel a little bit more, and it'll be good for everybody. So hopefully that common sense will prevail as well. Yeah,
exactly. I think that makes complete sense. You know, we are, you know, at risk of sort of undoing any of the benefits that are being created by the vaccines if we continue the requirement for testing. I think the testing just needs to go out the window, full stop, in environments or markets where you've got a level of vaccination now that is perfectly, you know, reasonable and has been deemed to be successful in breaking the link between hospitalizations and the virus.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, on the other side now, over this side of the world, Steve, we had a little bit of good news last night. Brentford. So as you know,
I was going to ask you, Chris, how did that go?
Yes, it went really, really, really well. Yeah. So they
How
won.
did they
They
get on with
beat
the
Arsenal.
Gunners?
First game,
Oh,
first game of the season, they beat Arsenal 2-0. So as we stand at the moment, Brentford are now top of the Premiership. Absolutely incredible. Great atmosphere, great
wow.
club, great ground. Very, very humble manager. And it was fantastic to see the way he responded to the crowd last night. Absolutely brilliant.
Very good.
Yeah.
I was thinking of you. Well, I was thinking of you because I messaged you. I messaged you yesterday to say that wished you every success against the Gunners. So yeah, well done. That's a great start to the season, Chris. And I was watching a piece on BBC News last night. It was I think they said, was it 75 years since Brentford have been in the Premiership? Yeah.
Yeah. And the ironic thing is, it was a game against Arsenal, the very last one, and Arsenal beat them 1-0.
Yeah. Chris, I don't know if you can hear the background noise. Salam's obviously walked away from his computer, but Salam, there's lots of background noise. Your microphone was left open. So we're having an open mic moment here, Salam.
Well, let's hope Salam doesn't say anything that he shouldn't be doing now while he's walking away. So anyhow, we'll continue. But I want to give a little shout out. I don't know whether my nephew Luke Taylor listens or a old friend from the old Salesians, Sean Algar. But they're both crazy Brentford supporters. They've taken a lot of stick over the last 9-10 years, and they were both there last night. And young Lukey sent me a very crazy message in the early hours of this morning. So I can only assume that the Morettis were flowing there as well, Stephen.
I'm sure. Well, doing bars or London Prides or Carling, I guess, keeping it English, Chris. But look, I guess the good thing with that is, and it's something that it's sort of, I know is close to your heart, Chris, is the funds that gives and injects into the team, from obviously the rights and the broadcasted rights, and just being a part of that bigger association of the English Premier League. All of those funds now go back into kind of grassroots development and supporting the academy teams and so on. Is that something that that I think is everybody could do a bit of with when you get to that level of success, actually reinvesting in the young today, which I think we also saw in the Olympics, didn't we?
Yeah, exactly, and it goes across all, not just sports, but across all business and industry as well. If you really do invest in people when they're hungry and they're not sure what they want to do, you've got them, well, almost for life. They'll never forget what you did for them. So you've got an ambassador and a salesperson no matter where they go for your company, which is brilliant. Also, Nadia Dunn, she was on one of the earlier podcasts, and she's also Brentford, and so's her partner, and their son they named Jude. So they told me that when they took him to Brentford for the first time, because the Brentford supporters sing "Hey Jude," he was mesmerised. He was thinking, why are they singing this to me? So it was lovely.
Oh,
so
fabulous! That's great. Yeah,
I'm so pleased for Brentford. Brilliant. Now, Steve, on the subject matter of how people can influence the next generation or even the current workforce, one of the things that I was looking at yesterday is SMS. Now, I mean, we all know, and anybody that's in the industry, there's things that are happening which are starting to be of concern, and people have got to now start to look at the impact of all the furloughs, the absence, the pressures on people, the quick response, and then the contraction, and then another response, and can people do it within the times, etc. It's an awful lot of pressure now on the industry. So it's very important that people at the top who are able to influence their workers do it in the right way. And I was this really interesting article about SMS and about how managers who say, of course, safety is the most important pillar of our business, etc., but they don't reenact those words in front of their colleagues and their employees. Also people who are too frightened to say something, because if they do, it won't be the right thing to say, and they could be penalized for it. There's a bit of nepotism. I want to keep in with the boss, so I don't want to cause any problems. All these things are so important now that people start to get right. So bringing back those values, bringing back those principles, bringing back the purpose of why we're in this particular business. If people don't start leading by example, there's going to be a lot more fallout, I believe.
Well, this is a topic I feel like we're covering raking over ground that we've been before, Chris, and that's an unfortunate sort of point that I make, because whilst you and I don't expect there to be an immediate response from industry to dealing with this better or changing as a result of criticisms or feedback. What we do expect management to be doing is responding to a higher rate of incidents. And I think that is something that we have seen anecdotally, I have to say, but also factually and objectively in some aspects. But anecdotally, for the most part, conversations that you and I have been having over the last, since the restart, let's say the last 6 months, I think meaningfully, Chris. It's very clear that when your eye is being taken off the ball, for very good reason. But when I say off the ball, it's just moved to a different pitch. And a different field, and it's looking at a different set of balls, because the ball that you were kicking down the park and thinking you can stick in the back of the goals was just ripped out off the field and moved elsewhere. So I think the priorities changed, which was all about cash conservation, preservation of liquidity, recapitalization, ensuring the organization was right sized for the future, and that's all fine. Now that we want the restart, and I think it's we're people are not naive to this, and business is not naive, in the sense of their obligations haven't changed. Their obligations have remained the same. And in fact, I would say, Chris, to an extent, obligations and priorities now and the focus has had to be drawn more with a bigger safety lens, because of the lull and the quiet period that we had, bringing people back, that hammer and claw that we mentioned before, you sort of pulling capacity back up and then the hammer's bashing it back down again. As we go through that, it's incumbent on every operator or service business in our industry to make sure that they've got the right lens on this. And I think that is pretty critical. I know what a lot of good businesses did, Chris, was actually they took away from the BAU or the business as usual, teams continued in place, but also there was kind of like a supplementary SWAT team or a control center or an advisory group that just kept their eye looking for early indicators or lead indicators to see what's going wrong and where. And there's no, there's no right or wrong way managing, through this restart. But I think there's something to be said, I think, wouldn't you agree, for such an approach?
Yeah, no, I think that oversight and where the focus is always on the critical elements, the elements that can really, really have a terrible or negative impact on the business. And that's what people need to focus on, because so many people, as soon as you open your laptop in the morning, you get your emails, you're gone for a couple of hours. Then you have a couple of meetings, you're gone for another couple of hours. And then the actual practical things that really need to focus, those are the critical areas that need to be looked at on a regular basis. So I agree with you. If you're able to see how the indicators are starting to move, you can respond in the right way. Yeah. No, very important. Very important. And also the right type of training as well.
Training, Chris. Yeah, absolutely. A topic again that we've raked over a few times before, but training, meaningful training that is relevant and is done for the right reasons, I think is what's required here, rather than the previous tick the box approach to audits or training, I would say.
Yeah. And just for your like last night, whilst I was just getting ready to go to bed, and I was just answering some emails, and I just scanned, because I just put them all into one folder. 53 emails and messages I got over the last 4 days, only 4 days, related to training. Are you interested? Is your company interested? We provide this. And all the training is, obviously it's of a good standard, but there's just too much of it, Steve. And now, to get a return on investment, there's far too much time being taken in the classroom or online with training, instead of, again, focusing on the critical areas that make that difference. So that's where we need to change. Now, also, we finished the last session with very good, Steve. That was you did that without moving your lips as well, eh? Ventriloquism. What people do in lockdown, eh? But we did this book, and it's by David Banmiller, Turbulence, and we finished the last sort of review of it. So we've gone through all of the chapters, we've gone through all of the different additional sections that he had. But yesterday we just went back on, what motivated him to write the book, how much relearning did he actually get when he looked back on his life? You know, what were his memories? You know, what would he have done differently? It was a really nice exercise from somebody who's really done it and been there and you know, knows so much. And he was very, very humble in the things that he said he would do differently and the things that he said were mistakes. But one thing that came to light was, like he said, even when he was a 40-year-old and he was in a good position and he was faced with certain decisions, had he been given a different alternative or a different approach, he would definitely have done something different. And he did that in several issues. So, you know, we were talking about, you know, how can people have access to people who've done things wrong, so that people get a better chance to speed up moving forward. Now, with that book, it brought me to a little question I wanted to ask you. Have you ever thought of writing a book?
I have actually. Look, I'll tell you the first thing that springs to mind when you ask me that question is when you know, a couple of friends of mine and I have gotten together in the past, and we've had, you know, sort of an epic time or an epic story or something of you know, worth, let's say. We always sort of say, look, let's look back, and it creates sort of this you know, a look back into, you know, what we had done or where we had been, or and this, I say this both in business and personally, because, you know, most of my friends, you'll no surprise, Chris, are also aviation people. I have other friends who are not so much in aviation, and we have equally great times together, but less content for a book, I would say. So most of the content that we develop is through working with friends, people that you trust and that you have both a great time with when on tour, but also get some really good, sorry, pardon the word, but yeah, getting good shit done, I think is a good way. So yes, we sort of look at that and say, oh wait, look, actually we could put a book together with this. You know, this would be so great. So yes, I think I've been very fortunate, Chris, to have experienced. You know, I always think about startup airlines and startups and how many people, you know, who will have worked for an airline will have actually started an airline, either their own airline or an airline that you know, they've been sort of hauled on board for, and thinking how challenging that is and how difficult that can be. And I've been very fortunate to experience, you know, four and a half. I say the half because one didn't quite get going, subject to thanks to a difficult regulator in Hong Kong. But you know, having started 4 airlines, that in itself there's probably 4 volumes of a book, Chris. Because when I think about the trials and tribulations and the late nights and the midnight oil that are burned just to start an airline, that in itself is a pretty epic story. So yes, is a short answer to your question, sort of tongue in cheek. But actually, could there be some decent content? I suspect there could be.
Yeah, well, why? I mean, not being funny. The saying says that everybody's got a book in them, but somebody's just got to start it, and the ones who start are in the minority. But I think you should start one, Steve. And what would the title be? Start now.
Oh, good question. I'll have to come back to you on that.
Start now.
Maybe a good question. Maybe it's a good question. No, let me give that some thought. I'm not a marketeer, Chris. So if I was going to write a book, I wouldn't be doing it for posterity. I'd be doing it for commercial gain. So because a lot of effort goes into writing books, and if there's no money at the end of it, what was the point? Other than sharing it and giving it to you for the next 10 years for Christmas presents, I think that's probably quite futile. You'd get bored of it after a while. So I would need a marketeer to come up with a title. It just so happens that I sleep with one next to me every night. So I might leave that in Ramani's good hands.
No, but I'm sure, do you know what I mean? With some of the you know, the tools that you've used, and also some of the experiences that were improved as you went from one to the other. I mean, it could be nice, useful also to help people who are, you know, looking to get into the industry and want to know more about what goes on behind it. You know,
you're too kind, Chris. You're too kind.
You should give it a go. You should give it a go. Now, as far as moving forward, any news or anything that you're expecting in the week ahead?
Well, look, some good news. I mean, I've seen, you know, more capacity going in market in Europe. I think that's really good. Domestic America, Chris, is going like gangbusters. A few hiccups along the road. Still domestically in the likes of, you know, some of the states reintroducing some restrictions again, but largely America is doing well. I've seen some good news out of India this week as well, with the announcement of the launch of a new low-cost carrier, which is great, and the launch of another low-cost carrier with which we worked and supported from the early days is Green Africa Airways. And congratulations to Babawande, Neil, Tayo, Sean, and all the team down there in Lagos. They had their first flight on Thursday from Lagos to Abuja. I had a ticket on that flight. I was checked in and I got seat 1 Alpha. So I was rather chuffed with myself, and I have the boarding pass for posterity. So that was quite nice, even though I couldn't get to Lagos as planned for the launch. So that's some good news. I've also seen, actually, Chris, some interesting news out of the OEMs this week, just that was summarized kindly by the guys in Aviation Week. And talking about aircraft orders and the fact that the aircraft orders, whilst they've obviously been adjusted or and the carriers and OEMs to manage that, there is still current orders, Chris, sitting there, firm orders of more than 1,400 Airbus narrow bodies and 600 Boeing narrow bodies. So 2,000 narrow bodies on order, which is phenomenal, held by Asia Pacific Airlines, and that's out of a total of 3,500 narrow bodies in total. So Asia Pacific disproportionately holds the biggest number there, almost 80% of the total, which is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, which also shows the way things are starting to move as well, with a lot of the domestic markets and big changes. Yeah. Now, as far as capacity coming back on now, and looking at the services on cargo, there's been a little bit of feedback with regards to cargo now getting second fiddle again and not having enough staff to manage cargo. So the services are starting to drop. And whilst they're at such high rates, that's going to put a bit of a challenge on as far as what people do and plan for the future, especially coming up to the busy season at the end of this year.
Yeah, well, busy season. I mean, we've seen. I mean, I'm certainly in e-commerce, Chris. It's been busy since last March, isn't it? Since people were spending too much time at home and decided to get trigger happy on their devices and order all sorts of crap, online, and some of it doesn't work, of course, coming from shonky, let's say shonky manufacturers. But look, I mean, I guess time will tell, Chris. Whilst it's a matter of getting the right balance of experience and skills and bringing new people through. So I think the skills shortage is thankfully a temporary kind of situation. As we get more consistency and confidence, both in the passenger business and the cargo business, kind of the levels that they will sort of operate at over the next 12, 24 months. I think businesses will feel much more comfortable and confident about investing in people, bringing people back into the business, training them, using things like apprenticeships really well, and getting the lads back on the line. And I think that will be really important going forward.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's also some of the, like my neighbour now is doing a bit of work, and they've had to delay it because they just can't get the materials. It's incredible.
Yeah.
From cement to wood to paneling to some parts for inside, it's incredible. So they've had to delay it. So these shortages are going to have a big impact as well, if it carries on for the next few months. Stephen, another week. Okay, I bid you much success over there, and I'm sure you'll be keeping busy, even though you're keeping inside. And look forward to seeing you again next week.
We are still inside, yes, Chris. We are still inside. I hope.
Still getting your steps in, I'm sure.
I've been doing less steps because, funny enough, my wife has had me doing a little bit more work around the house, Chris. So this week I've constructed a new playroom for my son. My snug has now gone. I've been doing some work in the garden and on my swimming pool, and also in the pond. So I've been rather rather busy. So funny that the step, although I would say, you know, steps haven't been there, Chris, but but I've still been expending the energy, the calories in other ways. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure. Right, mate. Well, I shall still think of you jumping up and down in the gondola, and I look forward to chatting during the week, and we'll see you again next weekend.
Great
And
stuff.
thank you, Salem, for not saying anything that you would have regretted whilst the mic was open.